that there are many different people that have the status of a Kohen. You have a Kohen Gadol who was anointed with oil. And there was a time period of Kohen Gadol that was, there was no oil, they hid the oil, so therefore they were anointed with perhaps wearing the 8 garments of the Kohen Gadol. Then there was the Kohen Gadol that was a temporary Kohen Gadol. Right, and correct. And then there was, Yehuda says there's a Kohen Gadol who was Meshuach Muhammad. It's not a Kohen Gadol, but he has the status of the Kohen Gadol, the one who went to the army and spoke to the soldiers, and he gave them instruction before they went to war. The Mishnah spoke about these Kohanim Gadol, these people are Machzirim Esaroseach. The Mishnah says that when they die, these are the people that will release the guy from exile, right? The prophet says, you wait ad mos haKohen HaGadol. Torah says the person stays in exile until the Kohen Gadol passes away. So now in the Bnei Yeshiva, when they were looking at the Mishnah, they were analyzing the Mishnah, they had the following question. We are on Yud Aleph from Beis 11b, a few lines before the Mishnah. It's about 12 lines from the top. The beginning of the line is Ve'ezeh. We got up to Ezeh Misar of Tiyeh. So we're done with the Yehud. Yeah, Yehuda, but Yehuda made it. He got into the yeshiva. Not only did he get in, Moshe prayed that he should understand and be able to answer questions. And he became a full-fledged great, he was back to his great self, of Torah and being that high level in Olam Haba. That's how we ended up with the Buddha yesterday. As a result of the prayers of Moshe Rabbeinu. You sent to the group, correct? What? Oh, very good. So that's how we ended yesterday. So now the Gemara wants to know, you have the Gemara, Mr. Boilu. Meet that kulam hu chozer. Morning, Mr. Batesh. Is it as a result of we're talking about the Kohen Gadol, Mr. Batesh. We spoke about there's the Kohen Gadol that was anointed with the oil, the Kohen Gadol that had the extra garments. If there was a time when there was no oil to anoint him, to officially make him Kohen Gadol, by putting on the 8 garments, that made that person. That was from that time he became Kohen Gadol. Or sometimes the Kohen Gadol was tamei, was contaminated. As a result of that, he wasn't able to do service. So then they would appoint a temporary Kohen Gadol. He would go in and do service. And then when the guy came, when the original Kohen Gadol came back, that guy was removed from his spot. But the Mishnah says that the death of these people get the guy back to home. The guy who was exiled as a result of unintentional murder, when these people pass away, he goes back home to his family and his hometown. But now the Gemara wants to know, do we need all these people to pass away? Meaning, in order for him to go back home, we need all of these people, these Kohanim to go. Let's give the case where we had a Kohen Gadol who was anointed with oil, and then we had a temporary Kohen Gadol, because that Kohen Gadol who was anointed became contaminated, and then a new person was a substitute for a couple of weeks, whatever, and then the other Kohen Gadol comes back. Do we need both of them to pass away because the Torah says you have to wait until the Kohen Gadol passes away. So if there's multiple people that have that status, because he was a substitute and he was and he had the status, he was a Kohen Gadol, he was called a Kohen Gadol. Like today you have someone, they'll call President Obama, President Trump. He's not no longer president, but they'll call him they'll still refer to him with the status, the title of president. So do we need both of them, let's say, to pass away? Or is it enough that any one of them pass away? The substitute passed away, that's good enough? Would that be good enough? Or just a regular Kohen Gadol passed away? Or do we need them all, both of them do we need the multitude, both of them to pass away? So that's the question of the Gemara. Right, that's the question of the Gemara. Do we need to? And there's another opinion in the Gemara that if there was the Meshuach Muhammad, that there was a Kohen that was his job was to talk to the soldiers, and there's an opinion in Mishnah says that he also has the status of his death also brings the guy back home, the guy for exile. If that Kohen dies, it also would bring him back home. So do we also need him also to die, or just him dying would be enough? Just that person dying. So that's the question of the Gemara. So the Gemara, meaning the Gemara knows, okay. So the Gemara says like this: maybe one of them is enough. You don't need all of them to pass away. You don't have to wait for the Kohen Gadol who's in office to pass away, and the substitute to pass away, and the Kohen of the war to pass away. You just have to any of them pass away. Anyone does the trick, or is it all of them? Is it all that has to wait because they're all considered under the umbrella of Kohen Gadol? They have Kohen Gadol status. They have that special status, and therefore the Torah says you have to wait till the Kohen Gadol dies. You have to wait till all of them, or anyone is enough. Mon Ariel. So the Gemara says, Toshma, come in here. Now, this is the style of the Gemara. What's the style of a Gemara? The Gemara has a question, right? The people in the yeshiva call it like the Amoraim, the later generations have a question. And how do they answer the question is they'll look at a Mishnah, a Braita, they'll look at an earlier source, and they'll try to derive the answer from that source. So the Gemara says, hey, Tashma, come in here. I have a source. I have something which should answer the question. Ariel, the question of the Gemara is, when we say the Kohen Gadol passes away, and then the guy who ran to exile, who stayed there, is released, and he can go back to his home, he's free to leave after the Kohen Gadol passes away, does it mean any of those Kohanim Gadolim, the one who's the regular Kohen Gadol, or the substitute Kohen Gadol, or do we need all of them to pass away? If there's a substitute Kohen Gadol, that's the question. And there's a regular Kohen Gadol, even though the substitute now went back home, do we still have to wait for both of them to pass away? Or any of them is enough? That's the Gemara's question. So the Gemara says, Tashma, come in here right before the Mishnah. Mr. Batesh, you have it? You're on 11b3. Okay. It's probably, I presume it's 11b3, I presume towards the top. In the English, yeah, Tashma, the top of the page, 11b3. Tashma. Nigma dino below Kohen Gadol. This is going to be the next Mishnah. If there was a verdict, Nigma dino means the Nigma means it was completed. It was come out. It was completed. Dino, his judgment, below Kohen Gadol. There was a completion of the judgment. In other words, a verdict was issued without the Kohen Gadol being in office. That means there was a vacuum, if that's the right word. There was, Kohen Gadol had died. There's no Kohen Gadol. And it says, Eino yotzei misham le'olam. It says that if there was a verdict, the guy who killed unintentionally, a verdict was rendered in the courts when there was no Kohen Gadol in office, the Mishnah states he does not leave exile. He's stuck in exile. How do you like that? That's right, because we never get, that's the next Mishnah. You're correct. We didn't mention it. It's the next Mishnah. Mr. Batesh, you wanted to say? Right, so that it's a new halacha that we didn't have yet. You're right, Ariel. But that's we need to have the Kohen Gadol in office. There needs to be a Kohen Gadol at the time of the verdict. That's what the next mission was, try to see more about it. In order for him to go out, there has to be the Kohen Gadol had to be in office at the time of the verdict.
I guess there was examples this happened. Someone says before the
Right. The Kohen Gadol might have died and they never reappointed a new one yet. Right? What would be the case? Oh, you're saying maybe the court should hold off, but the courts usually don't hold off. You generally we don't want to delay. It's not like the courts over here. Right, and I think and obviously the point is, if that's what happened, that means that is what the guy needs for his atonement. Meaning Hashem, God is behind the scenes, that they should make it that why is it that this guy has a verdict at a time there's no Kohen Gadol, and the other guy has the verdict with a Kohen Gadol. The other guy will get out free, this guy won't get a verdict. But this is how Hashem made it. This will be the proper atonement. Just like I think one of the Rishonim say, a guy could go to exile, and the Kohen Gadol could be a 95-year-old man, and 5 years you're out. Guy could be a 25-year-old man. You could be there for 70 years. How is that fair? The answer is, if that's what it's going to be, that means that was calculated by Hashem, that should be the proper atonement for each individual. Remember, it's not a jail. It's a city. People live. The Levium live there. A lot of people live there. But the only thing is, for this guy, he has to stay there. That's the problem. It's like a house arrest type or city arrest. I don't believe it's like, what would be any time a husband, in a certain sense, a husband wants to move somewhere and the wife doesn't want to come, it creates an issue, but usually it creates a big problem. But I would hope that the wife would want to come with the husband because this is their husband, and it's a functional city, so she should want to be there with her husband. She should want to have the kids together, have a family together. Not that she should be. This idea of women being independent and being happy to be separate, it's a new idea. It's a new phenomenon. This is not the phenomenon of old. Am I correct, Mr. Vitesh? I don't believe that 1,000 years ago that women would contemplate or. So just that they want this mentality of independence. It's not a mentality that I would the Gemara says that a woman wants to get married more than a man wants to get married. So the woman's going to want to leave. The woman's not going to want. We do things to make sure that the husband shouldn't be fast to divorce a wife. We don't want that to happen. So there are certain things that the woman is not looking to be alone with her children. That's not the normal situation. She go with her husband. Her husband will provide for her, take care of her in the city. He'll do what he can. He'll do commerce in the city. There were markets there. We said in the city, he had ability to support himself in the city. Then he'll go into business. What's the reason for exiling? I mean, it seems part of it is that he needs a big atonement because through his hands, death happened. And he could have been a little more careful. It was an accident, unintentional, but there was an element that he could have been. It's like the guy going down the ladder and he falls and there was a baby on the bottom and he killed the baby. He could have been more careful when he's going down the ladder. So not being careful enough, and as a result of you not being careful enough, you weren't negligent. Because negligent, then going to exile wouldn't be enough. But you weren't negligent, but you weren't exactly on top of your game. You could have been more careful. Therefore, he needs atonement. And leaving you, and it is a big atonement. Then a person has you're stuck. You have to live in a different city. You have no intention of living in the city, and you can have all your family could be living here, and your business could be right here, and everything what you had. But you know what? There's ramifications for one's actions, and that's he needs kapara. He really needs kapara. He caused death, and also there is a concept that many times people have to ask themselves, good things happen through good people. It says, Magalga is foot aydizaka. Merits happen through good people. Bad things happen through people who are something wrong, you know. We spoke about this concept. It's not always the case. It's not always the case. Well, again, I'm saying there's 100% that we say a lot of great people, bad things happen. But here we're talking about happening through somebody. Me being the agent to cause someone else's death. That is something that a person has to analyze his action and say, why was I the agent to cause someone else's death? So there is this concept that many times it's more frequent that a person, if somebody caused damage, hurt to someone else, it's indicative that there's something wrong with the person himself, that God did not protect him from, what did you say? And used him, as Dr. Levin said, as the agent to cause blood to someone else. So therefore that is, I've seen that concept in the commentary, that's something about, and maybe we'll even have something today about that concept. That when you listen, so good things, you ever hear the expression, good things happen through good people, right? The good person is generally the agent to bring good to others. And a person who is not on that, something wrong with him at his level, he's not protected from doing some things to other people. It's not always the case, but it's very common the case. So therefore, this person needs, that means there's something really wrong with the person. That if the death happened through him, then there's some other issues that the guy has, that he was used, like you said, as the agent to cause death. Right, that's right. Hashem, right, exactly. Hashem will allow this person to be this agent. He's not, if he himself doesn't act properly. So that's the Gemara's question. Who has to pass away? All of these people who have a status, Kohen Gadol status, or is it just one of them is enough? So the Gemara says, Tashma, Nigma Dino below Kohen Gadol. There was a verdict without a Kohen Gadol in office at the time of the verdict. Eino Yotzei Misham Lola. The guy who's in exile will not go out. He will remain in exile. So the Gemara continues. The ita, if it is true that any one of the Kohanim Gedolim that have status would have the ability to bring the guy out of exile, you don't need all of them to pass away. So let's say the Kohen Gadol passed away. He's not in office now. There's a vacuum. They didn't reappoint a new Kohen Gadol. But what about that temporary Kohen Gadol that served 5 years ago when the Kohen Gadol was sick or the Kohen Gadol was contaminated? Why doesn't that guy make what does he mean he's died without a Kohen Gadol? There is somebody in office. There's somebody around. There is the other guy, the temporary Kohen Gadol, who was once in office. If it's any one of the Kohanim, if it's any one of them have the ability to release the guy from exile, so even if the Kohen Gadol is not in office, the Kohen Gadol passed away. But what about the other Kohen? What about the Kohen who goes, according to the opinion that he goes to war? That the one that takes the people, that talks to the soldiers, also will release the guy. Why isn't, so what do you mean to say there's no Kohen Gadol in office? There's the other guy, if anybody could release him, if it's any of the Kohanim, So that substitute Kohen Gadol can release him. The Kohen that was talking to the soldiers should be able to release him. If you say you need all of them, so then if you don't have all of them, so that Kohen that you don't that so therefore he's stuck. But if anyone could take him out, so you have someone that substitute Kohen Gadol took over. Why the fact that the regular Kohen Gadol died, but there's another substitute that was a few years ago. Why shouldn't he not release them? Yes. Right. Every 24 weeks, the Kohanim were broken up into 24 families. Similarly, the Levium, Mr. Batesh, they were broken up, and they had a week service at a time. And then every 24 weeks, you repeated, you were called for duty for a week at a time. So like 2 weeks a year around, you had special weeks. But then the holidays, and everybody was involved, I think, in holidays. But there was specific family. That's only for the regular, right? That's specifically for the lower level Kohanim, but not for the Kohen Gadol. So that's the Gemara's question. If it's true that any one of the Kohanim Gedolim have the power to get the guy free, so it's true, the Kohen Gadol died. But what about the other guy? The substitute should be able to free him. So what are you telling me? There was a court case. There was a verdict without a Kohen Gadol. There's another Kohen Gadol. There's the other guy that should be able to do it. So the Gemara says, no proof. If you look at the Rashi lahada b'dahanach. Look at the Rashi. You have the Rashi before the Mishnah. See on the left side, lahada b'hanach. See it? The midat meruah begadim. The mita of the other Kohen that had more clothing, or let the death of the temporary Kohen Gadol release him, even if there's no Kohen Gadol in office, but there was the substitute that was in office a few years ago. We see, rather, we derive kula, we need the death of all of them. The death of one of them won't release him. That's what the Gemara wants to deduce. What the Gemara is doing here is, I have a Mishnah. The Mishnah says if the Kohen Gadol dies, the guy is stuck in exile. So the Gemara wants to use that as a teaching for us for our question. What was our question? Do you need all the Kohanim Gedolim to die, or one is enough? So the Gemara says, it seems you need all, because if one is enough, so what do you tell me? So what's the law if a Kohen Gadol dies? There's a vacuum. There's a verdict without a Kohen Gadol, and you're stuck. What do you mean there's a verdict without a Kohen Gadol? There's the old Kohen Gadol who was substitute is still around. So you always have a Kohen Gadol around. If any of them if any Kohen Gadol could remove him, so that guy should be able to remove him. So the Gemara answers no. The Gemara says no proof. B'deleka. Maybe we're talking about that there's no other Kohen Gadol around living at the time of the verdict. Meaning not necessarily was the substitute Kohen Gadol around during the verdict. You might have a verdict, the Kohen Gadol passed away. Let's say Aaron HaKohen is the Kohen Gadol. There could have been a time that there was a substitute Kohen Gadol, but there could have been possibly, first of all, there's some people that never miss a day in their life. There could be a possibility they never needed to appoint a new Kohen Gadol, a temporary Kohen Gadol. Possibility number one. Possibility number two is even if you had appointed a temporary Kohen Gadol to take over the Kohen Gadol, it's possible that subsequently he died. The substitute Kohen Gadol died. And at this time, when they're making the verdict, the only Kohen Gadol, only one who had the status of Kohen Gadol in the world was one guy. And that guy died. There was no other, and let's say they didn't, let's say the Kohen appointed the one that you would appoint to talk to the soldiers. Let's say we weren't going to war yet, we didn't appoint anybody, or that guy had passed away. So if there was no Kohen Gadol at all with any status, without, like today, like I said, we have many presidents, people, this President Obama, this President Clinton, this president, they have status. They're called president. But if all of them die, and the only one left is Biden, so there's only one president with status called president. Everyone else is dead. So that's what the Gemara is saying. Perhaps the case of the Mishnah says there was a verdict without a Kohen Gadol means there was no one else. There's no one else alive at this time of this verdict. And therefore, that's why he doesn't go out. But if there would be anybody alive, even though he was a temporary Kohen Gadol, he's no longer in office, maybe his death would perhaps get the guy out of exile, even though there's the regular Kohen Gadol in office. That's what the Gemara. That means let's say they appointed a Kohen Gadol. Let's say Aaron HaKohen. Aaron HaKohen was Kohen Gadol, right? So it's possible that he might, let's say what happens when if he became contaminated by mistake? A Kohen can't contaminate himself, but someone died in the room that he was in, and therefore he became contaminated because he was in that room under the same roof. What? So there's mixed, but you need 7 days for the person because you have the ashes of the paraduma. So he's 7 days, he's out. 7 days he's out of service. So what do you got to do? You got to appoint. You have to have another Kohen Gadol to take over during those 7 days. So that would be the temp. That's the Kohen Gadol. That's the temporary Kohen Gadol. And the Mishnah says he has the power. His death, even though he's no longer in office, he served as Kohen Gadol. Once you serve as that spot, you have a certain status. You're always Kohen Gadol regarding at least this law. And therefore, his death, according to this possibility of the Gemara, would be enough to release. They all have that in a sense, even though he's not working, he's retired in a sense, but there's a still status that remains for the person. Okay, I want to wish everyone a beautiful Shabbos to everybody. Shabbat, beautiful Shabbat.